Hello, 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 and welcome back to Ascension TV Online. I'm Caroline Mary, and I am your host today. And I am wishing all of our viewers a happy new year. I hope you've had a beautiful festive period. I'm still recovering from a cold, but I had an amazing, beautiful time with family and friends. So I'm very, very grateful. And today I'm so happy to be chatting with the beautiful Rufus Malim, who is an anthropologist and an experienced shaman who has worked with different cultures and is going to be talking to us today about what he does in the world. So, welcome, Rufus. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and we'll just dive straight in?
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you very much for having me on your show. I have been doing or got involved in shamanism properly back in 2022, and then I managed to do some more of it back in 2023. I was initiated as a shaman as part of my ethnographic research at the time, and I've been carrying it on ever since until the present. So I'm very familiar with some Mongolian techniques of using the jaw harp and the drum, and yes, it all formed a part of my PhD as well. So yeah, it's very much
Um,
been quite the journey. So
Amazing. Yes, I understand. I understand. So tell us a little bit about your PhD work and what has led up to you to getting involved in shamanism.
well, my interest in it started when I was about 18 years old. I had a very strange dream one night where I dreamt of uh, a type of magic men in a hut, and they sort of spoke to me, and I saw a whole load of other strange creatures around, and I thought, okay, this is very peculiar. And it's when I read up about Carlos Castaneda, who also 60s, I believe, or around that time, and it really sparked my interest and curiosity in it. And so from my undergraduate degree, I decided I'd study anthropology because I really wanted to study more about shamanism. This then led on to my master's, where I was able to do my thesis there on shamanism, particularly looking at it in Wales. And then lastly, I managed to get on to do my PhD, looking at shamanism in different parts of the world, primarily Mongolia, where I went to finally do some ethnographic field work and worked with a fantastic archaeology team out there as well. So no, that's how I'd say I got into it.
Oh, amazing. And I love that because I in my journey, there's been these like way markers, and if I look at my life through the lens of a typical Western life, it's a complete shit show. Okay, excuse my French, but it is. But if I look at it in terms of a soul journey and awakening, it just makes complete sense because I had my first vision as a kid, and it totally, I was just like absolutely like I am completely convinced there is God, there is this amazing force. I had this download and knowing that I was here to be of purpose. And then I kind of was like, okay, and now what? And then I just used to talk to, now people would say I talk to spirit, that's kind of modern nomenclature, they talk to their guides and they talk to angels and things. But I would just pray to God, and I didn't really think anything more about it. And then bit by bit, things happen and one door closes and you think, oh, okay, and you're taken over here. So, that whether or not somebody, I just want to say, like, I'm not saying for any minutes that, oh yeah, I'm a full-blown shaman, but I understand that my journey has been full of initiations, and
Mhm.
whatever we describe ourselves on a soul path, we're all on a path, aren't we, of awakening and things like this. So amazing. I love that, the vision that you were describing there. It's yeah, amazing stuff. So tell me about one of the things you mentioned when we were talking about you coming on the show is your experience with the shamans in Outer Mongolia. So tell me what that was like. What did you do? What was
Well,
that experience like for you?
it was really quite something, I'd say. It was definitely a real experience meeting shamans in Outer Mongolia. So I met some shamans in the capital city of Ulaanbaatar, and I met some shamans in the far north of the country as well. Both the types of shamans I met definitely had some significant ability. So most of them would be able to drum, and as they would describe it, they would become possessed by their ancestor spirits, and their ancestor spirits would speak through them
Yeah.
to to tell somebody information that they were looking for, or to try and do something to help to heal them, or help them find better circumstances. Um,
Mhm.
so you have certainly in the academic text, and you find it as well when speaking to some of them, there are a slightly confusing classification of shamans out there, but you have two distinct types to begin with. So you have a yellow shamans and you have the black shamans. So the yellow
Right.
shamans are shamans who have been um, involved with Buddhist practices. So Buddhist practice has been incorporated into the practice of
Right.
shamanism. So
Okay.
there are things that they generally won't do. For instance, that they will not engage in animal sacrifice. Their focus is on trying to connect with heaven, and try and find a sense of enlightenment. It offers another way through it, basically. Whereas black shamanism is considered the traditional form of shamanism, and
Right.
in
Yeah.
this, it then separates into two further categories. You have white shamans, and then you have black shamans again. So this is why it's a
Okay.
little confusing.
Yeah.
So
Amazing.
traditional shamanism in Outer Mongolia, in these two categories, the white shamans are the ones who work with their ancestor spirits and some nature spirits as well, of course,
Yeah.
to try and heal and help others in a very sort of positive sense. So they don't tend to work with dark spirits of any kind at all. I
Sure.
mean, that's not guaranteed, but generally that's the general gist of it. Whereas the dark shamans, they have a different approach where they try and gather together. If you have a problem, they'll gather together all their spirits to try and fix your problem, the good and the bad, and they'll essentially, as described by the author on Mongolian shamanism, pit might against might. So where everything else has failed, the dark shaman comes along and they use all their spirits, all of their power to solve your problem, almost no matter what it takes. And so
God.
these dark shamans are considered perhaps the most feared in Mongolia, and certainly in the far north, they have a real reputation, but they're very respected as well.
Yeah. Amazing. Amazing. So when you were talking about just going back to the yellow shamans, it
Yeah,
really made me think then, because I see in our modern world of spirituality, there's like neo-shamanism, and there are people doing shamanism, but they're also like trained in Reiki and da, 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 da. So there's a lot I see that, you know, things are overlapping, and that's okay. It's a good thing because we're drawing on other things. So that was really interesting for me to hear that there's shamanism and then they're bringing in Buddhist practices. So do you
yeah.
see like a correlation between like ancient and traditional ways and the modern way when you look at kind of modern practitioners now? Have you noticed that as well?
So this is a very interesting question, and is somewhat complex to answer. So I would say shamanism by its nature is in fact a very adaptable practice. It's some people say it's a religion. It isn't a religion. It has religious elements, but it isn't strictly a religion. It is a magical religious practice. And it is by its very nature, it's very, very adaptable. However, shamanism, certainly in the academic sense, only tends to show up in, we'll say, hunter-gatherer societies, pastoralist or nomadic societies, and sometimes horticulturalist societies. Normally, past that point in academia, we would say that shamanism kind of disappears at that point. However, that's not strictly true,
Yeah,
especially when you want to apply it more generally. But once again, this is the thing in academia, you need to try and be as specific as possible. So delineating where something starts and stops is very important.
I
So,
see.
with the question on neo-shamanism, whether that's shamanism like traditional old-fashioned indigenous shamanism, it is and it isn't. And there are lots of reasons between why it is and why it isn't. So, as I
Sure.
said, it is adaptable. Neo-shamanism, as we understand it, I believe one of the crucial individuals that kind of helped bring it to the West was a man called Michael Harner, and he learned shamanism in the Americas, I think particularly South America, and he developed a process which he referred to as core shamanism. I've got one of his books here, so
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Um, and so this core shamanic approach is what he suggested was, the core techniques and processes of shamanism, which could be adapted in a way that anybody could do, and was therefore applied into many parts of the Western world, and is very
Sure.
much forms the core, shall we say, of modern neo-shamanism.
Yeah.
So, as far as shamanism, the practice of shamanism goes, from a what we call a psychobiological point of view, because there is a psychobiological dimension. It relies on our shared sense of biochemistry and the ability to enter altered states of consciousness in our mind, to
Yeah.
engage properly with these altered states and to experience what it is within these states or through them, if you want to see them as a tool, which is
Sure.
probably more accurate when you're looking at it as a practitioner. It's a tool
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
go
Yeah. Yeah.
through and experience these things. That side of it is legitimate. What changes is, of course, the culture surrounding shamanism, because we live in an industrial society rather than a society that's very much embedded in nature and the natural world. And of
Yeah.
course, all our values are very, very different from traditional indigenous societies from where shamanism will have originally come from. So
Sure.
that's where it is similar and where it's different. So
Mhm.
I hope that kind of answers that question. We can dig into it a bit more if you like.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. And so when I think of shamanism, because this is honestly, it's been a big topic in my life, in terms of how can I say it? When I first came across it, when I like in my face, if you like, when I was in Portugal and I was in a festival. It was on a like a it was like a healing retreat project, right? And it was a very small
Yeah.
festival. It was 100 people. It was a healing festival, and I was really excited to go. I went there with my partner, my ex-partner, and when we got there, somebody said, "Oh, there's a Romanian shaman," and it was all like, "Oh, this is really interesting," and I was like, "Ah, oh, awesome, right? Cool, cool." And anyway, so the whole event started with a healing, like a ceremony. Okay, we did this angel walk and people were walking through a tunnel. So we were there and people walking through, and we were all just laying our hands on or giving kindness, wishes, hugs, blessings to the person, right? And we all taking turns. And the effect was absolutely profound. People were breaking down in tears. People were having like, I had like quite a I wasn't expecting it. I had a real like, I really don't want to do this because obviously you're being really faced with yourself and with other people. And at the end, like I was crying a lot and I was feeling a lot. And at the end, the shaman came up to me who said, "You're taking on other people's stuff. It's not yours. Like, let it go." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, actually, I can understand." And I hadn't really come across the empath, right? I hadn't really done a lot, these days online, everyone's memeing about all these stuff, right? Whether they really have a lot, whether they have expertise or not, right? We're all, sharing all this information. So I was like, that's cool, cool. And then it was like, oh, he's going to be doing loads of ceremonies. So I went to a ceremony, and suddenly again, I was really experiencing what the other people were feeling. And by the end of the first ceremony, um, basically this girl had collapsed, and I felt like I went, he opened the space. It was a very held space, and I went into what I would call like a trance, and I did an
Mhm.
extraction. Now I don't see, because I don't really tend to see energy, but I know I have knowings. That's one of my like clear strong gifts, psychic gifts. And I just did this thing, and he was like looking at me, and I was like, this just feels completely normal, like I could completely understand what I'm doing. So did this thing, and then she kind of came back round and she was crying, and then it transpired that she'd had prior trauma, and it obviously got really triggered in the ceremony. And it was very raw, and it was like, wow, this guy is really bringing up people's stuff, and he's not really
Yeah.
just saying what he's going to do. So in a
Mhm.
sense, straight away it's like, wow, this is the profound nature of energy when people come together, and especially with intention, right? And also, like, what can go wrong because he hadn't really pre-warned people. Look, this could be really energetically changing for you. This could be really profound. For me, what happened is I don't know where we met. Rufus and I met at a wellbeing fair. Okay, so in the UK we do wellbeing fairs. People come up and share their wares, and I sell books and do healings and things. And we didn't talk a lot, but we talked enough that I was like, I want to talk more to this guy, right? And
Yeah.
but basically, I don't think you would know this, but I got sectioned. I can't remember if you talked about it, but and when I was in that altered state and doing the extraction with the girl, I was like, holy shit, this is what happened when I was sectioned. Okay. For me, it was the absolute same thing because in that time I was in a heightened state. Nobody around me knew what was happening, but I felt normal. I felt more me than I'd ever felt before. I was getting
Right.
information coming to me. I was seeing things. I was having profound understandings. I was getting like, 3D webs of information. It was just unbelievable. It's amazing. What happened though in the years,
Yeah.
obviously I learned you have to shut this stuff down. And that experience with the Romanian guy really showed me that there's like a merging. I feel like there's a merging that's happening where there's the traditional roots, there's traditional training, and people in traditional cultures, as far as I'm aware, they'll be trained from a young age, they'll be spotted and they'll be
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
taken through, right? And the same in
That's
South
quite true. Yes.
America. Yeah. And in our culture, because like you said, we're in this industrial Western world, we're almost in this homogenized,
Yeah.
situation where everyone's being brought up, pushed through into kind of academia or whatever. I was certainly
Yeah.
was,
Yeah.
I was set up, oh, you're very clever, you're going to be successful somehow. And like I couldn't see anything in the world that resonated to my heart. I knew theoretically. So like I could do this or this, but it was like nothing, it doesn't mean anything. And I kind of turned left when I left school,
Yeah.
like a lot of kind of hippies are going,
Yeah.
I don't want to join in with the industrial thing. So, I really saw then how we can have, like those of us in the West can have profound lived experiences, even though we haven't walked the traditional path. So
Yeah.
what do you feel about that? Because my sense is it's that we are awakening from past lives. So if we're drawn to it, we're having profound experiences, we then start tuning in to things that have happened in our soul that we didn't necessarily train for in this life, which is what happened in that experience when I was working
Yeah.
with girls. So have you witnessed that when you compare like the traditional training, traditional cultures who have those shamans that have been trained, and then the new what you might call neo-shamanism? Have you
Mhm.
witnessed that yourself? Like you obviously had a dream which was kind of like an
Yeah.
awakener for you, so have you encountered that as well with other people? Rufus, what's your feeling on that?
So, so yes, no, to answer your question, I'd say it's best to start with the indigenous practices and their selection process.
Right.
Because so when they select people, they look for people who have a natural gift for the process, for having to enter into altered states of consciousness, the natural proclivity to go in and basically become a shaman. So
Mm.
this is part of the terminology thing as well here, where you have the difference between shamanism as a cultural set of techniques versus the innate qualities which are often required in traditional indigenous settings for someone to be selected and then trained as a shaman. So
Yeah.
when someone is a potential shaman in an indigenous culture, they often come from a lineage of shamans that have already existed, and then that
Right.
knowledge is passed on down through the family generation after generation. Sometimes it
Yeah.
skips a generation or two, but generally it's sequential. And the other side of it is direct selection by spirit. So you have someone without perhaps a lineage who suddenly has these experiences, and the other shaman in the community recognizes, right, this person's clearly got the gift. I've got to train them, basically.
Right.
The third
Yes.
method, of course, of selection is self-training. So someone who hasn't necessarily been, we'll say, chosen by lineage or by the spirits or the gods, but someone who wants to do it themselves. Some cultures accept that, some don't. So for instance, in the Western version of shamanism, neo-shamanism, we would fully accept that as that's part of certainly our belief system in generally. So generally these days we accept
Yeah,
that. Other indigenous societies may accept it, may not accept it
sure.
as they will.
Yeah,
So that, then they go into training process, which is where they're then trained in the techniques of shamanism. So shamanism is itself really a set of techniques.
yeah,
And once they've been trained in that, they then become fully the shaman that serves that community. And so those techniques of shamanism change depending on the environment in which their tribe or their group is situated.
sure.
Because, for instance, if they use psychedelic compounds, for example, it's dependent on the local fungi, fauna, and flora that's
Yes, of course.
available
I
to
see.
them to
Yeah,
use.
yeah,
Um, so there's a lot of abundance, we'll say, and a lot of use of it, of course, in South America and Mesoamerica. They've got lots of different types, and so they make good use of them. In
yeah,
Mongolia, for example, they actually do have some, I think, Solanaceae plants there. But as far as my experience goes, they don't use any of those. They just use drumming, sound, jaw harp, and perhaps some movement as well. So they
yeah,
completely ignore the psychedelics and just focus purely on the mind and use rhythm
sure.
and how do you call it, auditory driving to get into the altered state. So when it
Right.
comes to people becoming shamans in places like the UK or the Western world, it really comes back again to that innate gift, part because I said before that self-made shamans are considered legitimate in the Western world because
Sure.
we have a very democratic way of looking at things. So culturally speaking, we think that's acceptable. But you
Yeah,
still have those who would be classified as having the innate gift because it doesn't
yeah.
matter who you are or where you come from. If you've got it, you've got it.
I
And these
understand.
people, certainly yeah, these people certainly in British folklore, for example, would have probably been considered mediums in our folklore,
Yeah,
mediums or psychics or seers, people who have these experiences, but they didn't necessarily have all the tools that shamans do in other indigenous societies to have
yeah,
trained them to the full maximum of their ability, shall we say.
yeah,
So the gift's still there, and it can still be passed down family lineages, even places
yeah,
like the UK, Europe, America as well. Um, it's still technically there.
yeah,
It's just the techniques that go behind it have
yeah,
been somewhat lost in some places, and some people are experimenting to try and either find them again or rebuild them in new ways. So
yeah.
it's definitely, yeah, it's there's certainly a deal
Can
of
I?
complexity behind it, and that comes back to that psychobiological side of it.
Sure. And do you know what's coming
So
to
yeah.
me, Rufus, is that so it's just so interesting. I just love this discussion. That I have met quite a lot of people that would call themselves sorry, psychics or mediums, and they're practicing, they have clients and they do
Mhm.
card readings at fairs and things like this, who will say, they come from a lineage. But what comes to me really strongly is there's quite a division between the psychics and the healers. And actually,
Yeah.
I'm currently writing some healing manuals at the moment. And some of the resources I
Mhm.
was looking at, there was this really clear statement, like, healing is not to be confused with clairvoyancy and mediumship and must be kept separate or something.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is just,
Right.
to me, it's absolute tosh, because when I so
Mhm.
my next kind of connection with shamanism, shall we say, as in real life, an external experience rather than my own interior experiences, shall we say. I was invited to a ceremony here in Wales, and it turned out to be an ayahuasca ceremony. Now, because of my hospital admission, I was well aware that some people might say,
Mhm.
"Oh, we wouldn't do that because in the West, if you're crazy, you're crazy. We'll put you over there, and we won't let you be involved in things." So I just went along,
Yeah.
but because I'd had this experience with this Romanian guy, and it really woke me up to Jesus, I feel like I have that. you know, I have that. That is part of what happened to me. I knew it kind of at the time. I wouldn't have called it shamanism, but I knew I was having a psychic awakening basically. And a lot of people just didn't want to know. And I had to shut it all down. So I was very much really open and really excited and
Yeah.
like, wow, this is a thing, right? This is really a thing. And I was kind of really saying yes to this. You know, I made a commitment. I say yes to spirit, show me where my path really leads. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go to the ceremony. And they watched me. Okay, there's two Peruvian shamans, and I watched
Hmm.
everyone who had attended, and they all came up from London, and you could feel they had like London energy. And I was laughing because I live in Wales, and I was like, wow, we're all really tense. And I was like, do you know what? I'm just going to see,
Yeah.
like, maybe they need a bit of a massage to kind of like chill them down a bit. And I kind of checked in, is this your
Mhm.
ego? And it's like, no, this feels like a genuine offering. You know, I'm a trained massage therapist. And I know, you know, years ago, I used to just massage people at festivals. So I went round and chatted to them. Do you want a massage? Oh, yeah, that'd be nice. So everyone was just like chilling, chilling. Unbeknownst to me, the shamans had watched me. And before this, we went into the ceremony, they said the guy that could actually speak English, because the older, you know, the elder shaman couldn't speak English. He said, would you do healing on our, you know, on our guy? I was like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, okay, yeah, of course, you know. Uh, and I was in there quite a pompous state, so I was like, yeah, go for it. And I did, right? I put my hands on him. And literally, it was the same thing that happened with the girl in this other ceremony. I literally went into like an altered state, and I was started doing this thing,
Brilliant.
which
Yeah.
really is what used to come through me when I would freestyle massage at festivals.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you know, it wasn't like a paid thing, it was like friends and things. It was just very intuitive. And I started speaking light language. So I was channeling. And in
Hmm.
South America, we know like they call their healing songs Icaros. And I would
Yeah.
say a lot of people speak in light language. Really, it can be the same, I think, but you know, I haven't investigated thoroughly. But anyway, so I did all this
Yeah.
stuff.
Hmm.
And during that time, I received a few weeks later, I received a vision, which sounds a lot like your vision. And I was
Yeah.
told, you need to do shamanic massage. You need to bring this to
Hmm.
people. So I started doing it with friends, right? And just seeing what that was like. And every single time, and this is the point I was getting to, sorry, for a moment there, I was lost in my memory. I was like, what am I on about?
Okay.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and what happened was I would get their guides coming in and they were helping me. I had healer spirits
Hmm.
coming. I was doing it, it was just so profound. These sessions were unbelievable. So
Yeah.
for me, there was absolutely no division. Like it was a psycho-spiritual event that was
Nice.
healing, yes, but I would have messages, I would be relaying things to them. I was checking, you know, does this feel right for you? This is
Yep.
what's coming, da, da, da. And every single one was different. They were deep and profound. And I stopped it because I'm like, I'm not trained, right? And I have a piece of bloody paper to do this. I only have a certificate to do massage therapy. And then I went on to do different healer trainings. And again, that message, you've got to do this. I kind of, it's been in the back of my head. And now I'm writing a course manual. But, you know,
Yeah.
coming back to what we were talking about, there feels like in the modern spiritual community, people are either doing the seeing, you know, and doing card readings, or they're doing healing. And it's almost like that. So what do you feel about
Mhm.
that? Have you experienced that? Have you countered that? And what's your feeling on that or
So
anything?
again, with again, this perhaps comes back slightly to a technicality on what shamanism about versus the other magico-religious practices. So a magico-religious practice, again, a blanket term for all things like shamanism, you know, everything from that to Western esotericism, seeing, tarot reading, the lot, all of it. It has a magic. Sometimes it can be more magico than religious, sometimes more religious than we'll say magico. But it
Sure.
also includes stuff like theurgy, Gnosticism, stuff like that.
Sure.
Um, so in definitely in Mongolia and in a few other places as well, you have the shaman, but you can still have other practitioners who do their own thing as well. So
Right.
sometimes you will have it where the shaman can do they do the healing, they do the seeing, they visit other realms to get the information or the healing they need. They channel the spirits as well. Sometimes in some cultures, they will actually begin to professionalize in specific areas. So, and sometimes where that happens, you have someone who has a unique, particularly strong gift in one area, whereas they might not have it in others. And so, for instance, we'll say that's as a seer, so they don't necessarily become a shaman. They will focus on honing their abilities as a seer, and they'll provide that service to their community. The shaman might be able to still do, there might be a shaman in the same community who can act as a seer, but can all do all these other things as well. But
Sure.
for instance, they might kind of step aside and let the seer do their thing. So sometimes, we'll say, a sort of more professional approach and specialization does begin to occur. And you can definitely see that as societies begin to expand and you transition from that more nomadic or hunter-gatherer setting to something that's slowly becoming more hierarchical, agricultural or industrial. It does
Sure.
affect the magical religious system and the behavior of the practitioners within it as well. Um, so having it split apart between different professions, that's again perfectly legitimate. And then you still have these professions that can exist in isolation of each other. But as far as a shaman is concerned, a shaman can still do all those things in their way, and contribute that to the community. Whereas these individuals can also remain specialists in their own area and carry on focusing on doing that in their own capacity too. So there is
Sure.
room. There is room for all of it. And certainly another author, Monsieur Eliade, he identifies this process ongoing in some cultures and this progression from just having a shaman or perhaps a shaman and a herbalist to then
Yeah.
spreading out to different types of magico-religious professions. Um,
Sure.
so
And that
it
makes
can be
sense.
legitimate both ways.
It makes sense,
Yeah.
doesn't it? Because I remember years ago when I mean, I grew up, and this is how early my kind of very deep thinking started. I did not like being white. I was thoroughly ashamed from being British for the, all of the stuff that we've done in the world. Obviously, lots of cultures we've all done lots of different things in, but I absolutely detested being white. I did not like being a girl. I really struggled with that, and I still have quite a gender fluid in a world at times. And I knew I'd lived in other lives. I absolutely knew it. We used to have this children's history book, and I'd open a page and I'd be like, I can't see it. It was so that the feelings were so strong, and I would feel really angry because how they were depicting it was just felt so insulting and kind of like just like no way. Like some part of me was like it just wasn't like that, or it was so profound, right? And God, that's funny. I'm losing my train of thought. Oh, that's it. So yeah, so when I was really struggling with the modern era. Okay, really just like, oh man, we're killing the world. This industrial way of being is just so wrong. People are chopping down the rainforest, and I was really in panic, and I just wanted to escape it. I really just wanted to go back to basics. And no, I didn't consciously move to Portugal to do that, but it ticked my
Mhm.
box.
Yeah.
Okay, I met people
Yeah.
there, and he was a self-named shaman, Gregory Reese Smith, and we I did some vision quests there, and I got to live in a year on the land, and it was really like, oh, finally I get to be back in nature because
Mhm.
as you let's talk about that in a minute. The animism,
Yeah.
there's such a strong call to just want to be in a more natural environment. It's a calmer
Yeah.
space for people who are sensitive and all the stuff, right? But what I realized is I knew a lot of people that want to go back to basics, live off grid, but you end up back really when you're back to basics, you're starting to think you've got to be the one that needs to make the candles, gather the food, make the clothes, da da da. And I really started thinking, this
Yeah.
is stupid. Like, what is wrong with that specialization? That to me,
Mhm.
like, if we just pretend there is a beginning that we really know, and there was culture where humans were very basic, and who knows the true history of humanity, so we won't go there, but there's a whole other conversation, right? But
Yeah.
like, you look at a tribe, and even within a tribe like that, you probably had people that
Of course.
specified You know, the men
Yes.
would go
Yeah.
hunting, the women would watch the children, and that's okay.
Mhm.
And I really started to
Mhm.
see, like, I don't want to go back. Like in my life, I've learned to grow food. Like I've always grown food if I
Mhm.
had a house of vegetable, you know, with a garden. I've made clothes. I've drummed. I know I've done a lot of those really basic jobs. And it's like, I don't actually have to do it all because if I try
No,
to, I can't specialize, you know? And so
no,
yeah, so it's just
exactly.
really
Yeah.
interesting. Sorry, I'm going off on a tangent, but it really feels good to feel that drop in when thinking about healing rather than, oh, we shouldn't
Mhm.
segregate. It's like, for sure, I think there needs to be
Mhm.
allowed to have an overlap. So, for example, in the training with
Yeah.
Shaman's Hands, I have really felt a roadblock because it's like, how do I teach people to be clairvoyant and healers if in the Western
Mhm.
world we're not allowed? But for me, I can't do one without the other. Like it doesn't work. As soon as I
Yeah.
open
Yeah.
space, I'm going to
Mhm.
get all of it happening because that's what happens for me. So I'm still with a question mark over it, and I need to look in, you know, dig into the kind of
Mhm.
legalities of it really. But thank you. It's just a really interesting point. So I want to say as well for any viewers, you know, if you're, you know, you might feel like you want to train in shamanism, or you might feel like you have elements of your shamanic truth, like maybe you've had a past life. Like I believe a lot of us have, and we've come into the West, you know, just bear that in mind because I think when I started, I was like, well, I can't do this, but I can do this. I can't do this, but I can't do this. And actually, like as a soul level, we're not going to be called to come in and do exactly what we did in another life, would you not say? So I'm going to hand over back. What do you feel about the reincarnation of people in the West who maybe were shamans in other lives, right? And
Mhm.
bringing their gifts through. So what, you know, have you experienced that? Do you feel like that for yourself? What's your feeling around that, Rufus?
Mhm. Well, yes, a discussion on incarnation is, that is very, that is very interesting. So, again, in some cultures, they would believe that a shaman in one part of the family, so a grandfather or a great grandfather, or a grandmother or great grandmother, could reincarnate as one of the children later on, and then redo the shamanism again to help the community. But again, this might be in a time or a situation where in indigenous communities where the lifestyle doesn't necessarily change. There's good reasons for that. And so then you have continuity, or not just continuity, but a cyclical experience of time and of place, basically. Because again, a lot of these, like shamanism, and when we talk about animism as well, all relies very much on a completely different perspective on the world, a
Sure.
different experience of reality and nature, one, yeah, embedded in the seasons, but it has a cyclical experience of time, which again is very different from our modern perspective of time,
Yes.
which is purely linear. The
Yes.
idea that and it's very much linked with I'd say, technology more than anything else with us today. The fact
Yeah.
that, our accomplishments are accumulative, they grow and they increase in size and scope, and you look to expand. So it's always the next step in what's going on. So it breaks the experience of the cyclical mindset, which is very much embedded in our far more traditional experience of life on this world. So that human beings have been around for as roughly, okay, I'm going to go out and say about 2.8, 3.2 million years, different species of human in that time,
Yeah.
of course. Um, we have like a date on a potential origin for shamanism at the moment. We'll say it's roughly around 60 to 70,000 years old.
Okay.
It's not guaranteed, but current evidence or that we have access to suggests that it might be that way. It's based on linguistics and investigating certain legends that I think come from Africa.
Right.
That was a paper done by Witzel. Um, and yes, in
Okay.
some of these communities, a belief in reincarnation might have been there, or certainly was there in some communities. In others, it's slightly different. And yes, they would come back to help their
Yeah.
communities.
Um,
So then applying that in any other way to a modern industrial society or post-industrial society makes things more complicated. So you might have people who come back to help, but their skill set might well still be there. They might be trying to do what they can to help people, but our whole perspective on the world has completely changed. You know, the whole thing again with science and technology is grounded in a completely different philosophy from animism. It's based in a philosophy that's very much based in materialism, what you can only see, what you can touch, what you can predict through the medium of mathematics.
Oh,
Whereas animism is an experiential philosophy. It's not really even a philosophy, because animism was created by anthropologists to describe a set of beliefs that seem to be shared across the world and among indigenous communities. So it was fair enough that they did that, because it helps give us a better understanding. But animism is fundamentally an experiential philosophy. And it makes sense because if you are living in the natural world around you and you need to survive and you do what you can for your community and everything, you have to rely on every sense that is available to you, to make sure that you do survive, that you can, carry on contributing to the rest of the community and staying alive yourself, of course. Um, and again, all the natural predators and dangers that existed in that natural world. For animists, they say, well, the spirit world isn't necessarily any different for them. The spirit world can be nice, it has its nice locations, but as much it has its underworlds and its dark places too, and its predators. And so, of course, this is what the shaman is there for, especially when you have a reincarnating shaman, which I think they do believe that in certain parts of Siberia, the shaman, when they die, they return to this great cosmic tree, and they sort of perch on its branches as a kind of an eagle or a bird. And when it comes their time again to be reincarnated, they leave the tree and they fly back down into the womb. Um, so yeah, and they serve the community, protect them from the malevolent forces of the supernatural, which are like again an extension of the natural world, but in the spiritual world. And then they try and help protect them and move them to a better sense. So anything, even disease, the idea of disease, again, materialist sense, we see it as bacteria, tiny microscopic entities that are parasitic, they eat away at you. It's like, okay, but the animistic experience of it is, well, okay, the bacteria must have a life force and therefore perhaps a presence in the spirit world. So
oh,
rather than attacking its physical component, which they will do with herbal medicines, of course, they will also try and go into the spiritual world to attack its a spiritual or conscious dimension of its existence
sure.
as well. So
Yeah,
there is a whole blending. There comes a point where you blend the other world with the physical world, and there is a point with which where you can cross between the two, and they're constantly interacting with each other. But as I said, it's a completely different perspective with
I,
the physical, materialistic world that we now live in, that's based in our technology, our sciences, and if we go back to your question about reincarnation, people who might have been shamans in past lives coming to live here, the perspective, the dominant perspective that we rely on, isn't one that's friendly to shamanism necessarily. To be involved in shamanism, you need to shift to an animistic perspective on the world, a different type of philosophical shift. That's like the first important shift you have to make in your understanding. Um, and then it basically go from there. It doesn't deny the success of science. It doesn't deny the success or the functionality of the material world. It just says there is much more to it than this. And this is how people have survived and existed for thousands of years previously. The
sure.
science is
Yeah,
very young in comparison to a belief like or a set of beliefs like animism. So I know
sure.
it's a very roundabout way of perhaps answering your question, but
Yeah,
yes.
no, it's all fascinating. I just listen to it and I'm having, ideas and things come up. It's just absolutely fascinating. And when I talk about the reincarnation thing, it it came, like I said, I've had like what I call feeling memories, okay, about it. So, and some people are like, oh, did as though I'm thinking to have an experience, and it was like, no, this is
Mm.
just a lived experience. I'll go somewhere and feel like, oh, I know something about this place, or da da da, da. And the feeling was there's no other explanation. This is an
Yeah.
incarnation memory of this coming to
Mhm.
me. And oh, I'm sorry, I've lost my train of thought. The reason
Okay.
why, oh, that's really funny, isn't it? It doesn't matter. I think the point is, it doesn't really matter what I think, because I'm here to ask you what you think, because you're the expert, and I'm absolutely loving this conversation, Ruth. Honestly, I could go in any direction at all. So when we arranged to meet,
Mhm.
you were going to talk about shamanism and animism. Is there anything else you'd like to add about what makes a bona fide shaman a shaman? Like, what are those characteristics if we were to hone down on those?
Mhm.
What skills and
Okay.
characteristics and things like that do
Mhm.
they?
Okay. So again, again, it can be a bit tricky. So you have to balance to understand what a shaman is and what shamanism is. You have to first kind of separate the two terms, shaman and shamanism,
Oh,
and then you go down even further between them. So for making a shaman, you first of all have to have the individual who has the innate gifts
yeah,
in an indigenous sense, of course. And these gifts can be anything from having really bizarre or lucid dreams. They might have visionary experiences whilst they're awake. They might have the ability to heal basically with their hands. Certain types of, if they have a supernatural gift that is recognized by their community, then that's also a potential sign that they are a shaman or a shaman in making anyway.
yeah,
Um, there is also certain characteristics ascribed to shamans as well, that they can be quite aloof individuals, especially when they're younger. They're kind of separate from the rest of the group. They might be more studious. They might have a greater interest in we'll say the lore or cosmology of the group from a much younger age. So it's kind of more a slightly more introverted personality, perhaps. That's
mm,
again not necessarily all around, but these are kind of the traits they're looking for. But especially dreams, if they have memories from a past life, that might also be of interest to them. Especially if, of course, they start having visions or dreams of gods and what have you. Again, that might be another indication. And so they take these, yeah, and of course, if they see spirits and what have you, like the seers, and if they can predict events as well with accuracy. This is something that is often missed, is that shamans gain good reputation on their accuracy. So, like any other profession, if you're good at what you do, then you get more people who come to you. It's the same with shamanism. If they deliver results, they do get more people that come to them. And if they don't do such a good job, then they have fewer people who will come to them for help. Um, so I mean, I'll leave that as it is. So then they have those natural traits, and so that creates the first baseline for what they choose to select as a shaman. There is some differentiation in the community. They might have some other slightly different culturally specific things they look for, but generally that's the general gist. So once they've identified it, they will then take that individual, initiate them, and train them in the techniques of shamanism. So these techniques vary on culture to culture. The different groups may have their own specific techniques, and sometimes these techniques will be specific down to the families themselves. So, there's specialization within specialization. And of course, they have to adapt to their own natural environment. So, again, as I said before about the psychedelics, if they have psychedelics available to them in that environment, they may well use them as part of their practice. If
yeah,
they don't have much access to those, they will find a different way. So, you can use ecstatic dance. You can use, as I said before, drumming and jaw harp, things like that, sounds to create an auditory driving. You're kind of drowning out yourself to get into an altered state of consciousness in those experiences. And so these techniques, that's certainly a more cultural dimension, and there is a material dimension to it too. So certain fauna that's available to you. So in Africa, for instance, they have a great appreciation for big cats. And if they get some of them, they will use them as part of their attire. Not always, but traditionally that was one of the key things, part of a magician's attire in Africa, and also the chief. Whereas in Northern Europe, perhaps, you might have a greater appreciation for bears or wolves. There's a fantastic burial called the Bad Durenberg burial in Germany. It's 8,000 years old, and it's generally accepted, from what I can see in the literature, as that being a burial of a shamaness. It's a lady, and
Amazing.
you have teeth, deer's teeth that kind of hang down from the mask to about here, or there might be wolf's teeth as well. And you've got an antlered headdress coming up from the back. There might have been evidence for a wolf skin or something else. There's also feathers down the side. It's fantastic. It's well worth looking at because yeah, I would
Amazing.
definitely suggest that
We'll put
shaman.
a link to that in the comments
Yeah,
below so that
yeah,
people can follow that up. That sounds
yeah.
fascinating.
So there is also a definite material culture there that sometimes is left behind to us as well. And of course, it is dependent on the area. So understanding shamanism as opposed to the shaman is a shamanism is the techniques. So that's the material side of it. And then it goes into what we call the qualitative, the conscious experience. And this is more or less where the science or hard science ends and just qualitative recording begins because there's not it's you can't measure it the same way if you can
Sure.
physics basically. And
Yeah.
so then when they go into their altered state, they experience things, they see the spirits, they may journey to other worlds or travel over the landscape. They may try and find specific individuals or items in that state. So the techniques have got them into this state of being, and now the rest of their training, the cosmology of the group, the what the shaman, the tutelar shaman has taught them becomes essential, because they then have to navigate through this place, this new landscape, to get the information or the action they want from the gods, spirits, their ancestor spirits, or even using their own powers to affect events in the real world. Sometimes they just want information. And so once they've got all that is when they're considered a shaman in the light of their community. Of course, there is the initiation as well itself. So once they've done the initiation, in some communities, and again, this is working with the works of Eliade, they are considered as part human, part spirit. They're not considered just human anymore. This is again in indigenous groups. I mean, the same logic still applies to neo-shamanism, but they're considered different by that point. So the initiation isn't just a learning and mastery of ability and techniques. It fundamentally changes you as a person, your state of mind and what you can do. You're no longer seen as just a human being. You are something else as well. Um, and so once you are that, you are the shaman. And the things they experience in these states, even like the initiation, can be pretty brutal in some cultures. In some cultures, they could be a little more forgiving. Perhaps I might not go into detail about it because it can get pretty graphic. But most of what they
Okay.
experience is in an altered state. If there's stuff done physically, it tends to be of a more symbolic nature, or at least that's what we would refer to it. There's a spiritual dimension to it, of course, but
Sure.
we would refer to it as a symbolic in academic literature. Um, so yes, it's understanding the innate qualities of an individual that can be selected for a shaman, then being taught the techniques of shamanism for them to finally become a fully fledged shaman of that community, of the
Yeah.
techniques in that community, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. Really, really well, really great details there, really helpful. And then part of me is looking at the time and thinking, goodness, we could
Oh,
talk.
right.
And
Yes.
I am wondering, Rufus, if you'd like to come back again in a certain time and talk more,
Sure.
because for me, this topic is just so expansive, and I think more and more important for us at this time because my belief is, and that's what I was going to say before, and this is where it kind of brings it round, is when I was sat in the hospital, okay, sat with people who were also, had been incarcerated and told, given a label and whatever. And we were talking about past lives, we were talking about existential queries, questions. We were just, everything was going. And I was just like, this is ridiculous, And I said, came straight out. We're the rainbow people. We're here to change the world. And yet we're being punished for being who we are because people don't understand us. And at that time, I'd not read any of the Rainbow Prophecies, and then come out, and years later, I then started reading and receiving and seeing so much because I was
Mhm.
at that point it was like 2006 and 7. I'd not really gone on the internet. I hadn't really read spiritual stuff. I'd not really met spiritual people. I'd read quite a lot of existential stuff. I read philosophy in university, so I was
Yeah,
really
yeah,
questioning, I was always questioning, but
mhm,
I was not a big reader. I more experiential and kind of questioning
yes,
stuff
yeah,
internally. And then
mhm,
find out about the Rainbow Prophecies, where the indigenous people of Northern America are talking about, basically how many of their people obviously died for
mhm,
modern America to come into being, and they're all reincarnating, and so the likes of you and I potentially, we're incarnating from like not only other places in the world, but actually very specifically from North America. And those
mhm,
people, and to me, we see this, everyone loves their dream catchers and they might have tattoos with feathers, and it's all,
yeah,
it's all really there. And it's like, I see it like a scratching of the surface of the soul. If you're interested in that, or you want to live outside, or you love to be at festivals, to me, it's the beginning of whispering of other eras that have been in our hearts, And so, yeah, as soon as I read the Rainbow Prophecies, I was like, that felt like that's what I was sharing to the people. So, um, any thoughts on that before we can go? Because I feel like I'd love to talk to you again and hear more about your personal experiences
mhm.
then, as well, if that would be okay.
Yeah. No, I so yes, I would have said with that is definitely a need, shall we say, to return to a more community-based way of life for a lot of people. Again, this makes perfect sense, in many different factors. I don't know if you've heard of have you ever heard of something called Dunbar's number?
No.
So it's a how do I put it? It's a way where scientists discovered Robert Dunbar basically discovered that the brain has to process information on a social level, and it varies the amount of different individuals it can process per person. So um, primates, so not humans, but primates have a limited pool. The amount of information they can process in a social setting is only so much. There's maybe about 15 other individuals in the group. For human beings, he's estimated that it comes to about 150 people. So the idea you can only process information for
Yeah,
about 100 other 50 people in a community.
yeah,
And the idea is that these individuals are meaningful. You understand their relationship to everyone else in the community, their
yeah,
history, what they were doing. And he makes it very clear that throughout history, including Neolithic communities, the communities would average out at about 150 people. And so
right.
when you're this kind of community, especially surrounded by, we'll say, dangerous weather conditions or the natural environments, it really kind of brings it together. It forces it together as a community, and you rely on each other and you help each other.
Yeah,
And of course, again, in our more modern world and industrial world, we feel very much separated from each other.
yeah,
There is very much a loss of that sense of community. And I think this is especially true in the last 80 years or so. As we still had it, I'd say we definitely still had it by the end of the Second World War, that kind of period. We still had a sense of community, especially in the countryside. But now
yeah,
with innovations in various different parts of technology, such as the internet, phones and what have you, despite them supposedly connecting us more, it's taken away the community element. And so we
yes.
need to find a way back. or find some kind of compromise that we can still integrate together as a community, which is what we as human beings are actually designed for. We're not really designed to live in such huge societies.
Sure.
Um, and of
Yeah, yeah,
course,
yeah,
what you're saying about rainbow prophecy or people going back to festivals or trying to live off grid certainly resonates with trying to connect back to the way of life human beings evolved to live as,
yeah,
what we evolved to live among. And so, yeah, it makes perfect sense. Again, same with the shamanism, the experiential side of existence. It's what we
yeah,
are built to manage or designed to do. Um, so yeah, I suppose
yeah.
that's
God, that makes so much sense. And it's, I've certainly always chosen to live in the countryside and I'm living in a town now, but it's too much. It's so noisy, and I just like I don't want it.
yeah,
I want to
yeah,
be nearer nature. But I also
yeah,
understood when I first started looking, okay, I want to be really in nature. Actually, I don't want to be on my own in nature or even with my partner in nature. I'd
no,
like
no,
to be, it's that community because otherwise, like I saw the beginnings of that feeling in Portugal, if you're on your own in nature, you're like having to do all of it. And it like what would be the point? Like, why wouldn't you have like a
yeah,
communal garden where
yeah,
everyone's helping each other and somebody
you need a
specializes in
community.
this and then
Mm.
it correlates. But it like, of course, if it's too much, because something that I felt growing up is where's my part? Like nobody needs me. Everybody is so used to being
Yeah,
independent and solo. And
yeah,
I felt really strongly, really depressed for a long, long time. And I think a lot of young people do now because like nobody needs you. So like what's the point, And in a
yeah,
smaller community, you'd really see, wouldn't
yeah,
you? Like, oh yeah, I can help here and I can help here. So yeah.
yes, exactly, exactly. I mean, one of the biggest problems of our era, I would say, is a sense of purpose. And yes, in a massive society where everything's running as a huge machine, everybody is replaceable. In a small community, everyone to a certain extent has value. And
Yeah.
this is something, it's difficult to replace that.
Yeah.
There are huge benefits, of course, to the way of life that we live currently, but it is at a cost. It's always at a cost.
I really hear
And,
you. And I like I've just
yeah,
seen people that I follow who are creating or have created AI versions of themselves. So
right.
people can like have them. And I've had friends tell me, I was talking to ChatGPT the other day. I'm like, for me, I talk to a guide if I need to talk to somebody and I'm on my own. I'm not going to talk to a bloody computer. That said,
No,
of course, the computer is, I do see that ChatGPT or some AI, think collect information from the contained mass consciousness that is the internet, but it's not conscious, it doesn't have an organic consciousness as far as I'm aware. And you just think, really? Because people aren't aware they can talk to their guides or they can talk to their higher self or they can talk to
yeah,
God or a tree or, So yeah, I find this modern world it's almost hilarious if it wasn't so tragic that people are relying on things that in the indigenous culture we would have relied on, or you would have gone to your
yeah,
elder for that help. You would
exactly.
have, I didn't have an elder. I don't know about you. There was no elder that I trusted because they had no wisdom. Like they didn't have the wisdom that I felt I wanted from in my heart, like that
Yeah,
that
yeah,
animistic kind of wider viewpoint. So oh Rufus, honestly, I could chat to you for hours and hours and hours on this subject because it's so dear to my heart. So would you come along and chat again with us?
absolutely. Yes,
Yeah.
I'd be happy to come along and chat again and go into more
Beautiful.
detail.
Beautiful. So before we close, I'm just going to ask you, because obviously we've talked kind of theoretically and about, different cultures, but let's bring it back to you. What do you do in the world now as a practicing or as a shamanic practitioner? Some people I know who are very shamanic. They're like, no, I'm not a shaman. I'm a shamanic practitioner. So whatever is everyone has
Yeah.
their way of describing it. But what is your practice? And if somebody wanted to work with you, what would that look like? How would they get in touch with you, Rufus?
So I mainly practice with, we'll say, ancestor spirits because this is what I was taught in Outer Mongolia by by my teacher there, because he saw that I had a potential gift, and he offered to teach me, and I said, all right, yeah, okay, I'll do that, and we did. So no, I use an instrument called the jaw harp, and I also use drumming as well. And I use it as a means to get in contact with my ancestor spirits and nature spirits as well, if needed, um, to either help people, either to get information for them, um, or my other favorite is to use Reiki, a type of Reiki to help people as well. So when I do Reiki, sounds perhaps a little similar to what you might have been doing, is that you start doing the Reiki, but you go into an altered state of consciousness, call all my spirits, they're there as well, and we do what we can to help people and heal them that way. Sometimes I can get a look into what they might be thinking, or I see things there, so it often extracts parasitic entities if they're there. And sometimes, they can definitely feel a lot better after that.
You
So I'm definitely reachable on Gmail, so shamansvivarium at gmail.com. And I have a presence on Instagram and Facebook. I think my Instagram presence is much stronger than my Facebook presence. I do have a website too, but it's still in a sort of a rough state at the moment.
Yeah, work in progress, like us all. Yeah, I love that. Oh,
Yes.
Rufus, that's been amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your understanding and research with us. It's been absolutely amazing to have you on the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me on the show. It's been wonderful to share it with you and everyone else here, and look forward to doing it again in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. That's brilliant. So, thank you so much, everyone that's joined us today. And if you want to reach out to Rufus, just check the comments and I'll put all the links below. And look out because I will be definitely bringing Rufus on the show again because I feel like we could talk a lot about this. And I really just think we're in a time that we're coming back to nature and we are all part of it. So, just because we're talking on the show doesn't put us on a pedestal above you. Everyone's got their part to play, isn't it? In every step in what we do, all the choices that we make, we're bringing nature back into the forefront of our lives so we can live in harmony, is my belief. So we're all part of that. So much love to you all. And I look forward to seeing you on another episode of Ascension TV online soon. So much love to you and see you soon. Bye for now.